Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today to have with us a friend of mine, Mark Passerelli. Mark, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Jamie. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Mark is an entrepreneur. He's a real estate investor, the owner of Phoenix Estates, and Mark used to be in my house quite a bit working on our working on our home. I can't
Right.
believe it's been almost 10 years since you were essentially remodeling like half of my house, which was
Yeah.
which was awesome. But
It was probably the worst experience of your life, right? Seeing me every day. It
right,
was
I've tried
awful.
to, yeah, that's why I forgot about it. I've just pushed it out of my memory.
Yeah.
No, actually those were good times. But Mark, how are you doing today, and what are you up to today?
Good. Yeah. Doing well. So as Jamie mentioned, I'm a real estate investor. So currently investing in buy and hold properties, doing some flips, and just started doing some wholesales as well. So that's kind of what I'm getting into, is the real estate field. Been doing it for about 4 years, and really enjoying it. It's given me a lot of freedom, and kind of allowed me to pursue things that I wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in because as we briefly touched on before we hit record, I've got some real gaps in my knowledge about your story. And if you see those like somebody goes on well, I know you've lost weight as well, but if somebody does a diet and that you see like the before and after pictures, it's like, wow. Because I have not been plugged into every detail of your journey, as much as I'm sure you would have loved that. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But it's just that when you sent me kind of an update with your bio, and I was like, wow, like I had no idea that you have 20 some rental properties and you've done all these flips and everything. And it's I'm like, what have I been doing this whole time? But no, it's really impressive,
Thanks.
just from my vantage point. And I know we're going to get into more detail here, but it's very impressive just seeing, quite honestly, you were the guy working on my house, and I'm not trying to put that down and put you, in any way. And now it's like you're a legit real estate investor. So not that you didn't have value then, but it's just impressive what you've been able to accomplish. And I know it hasn't been easy, and we're going to dive
Yeah.
into some of the adversity that
Yep.
you've been through. So before we jump into your backstory, right now, say in the next month, what's your focus professionally?
Yeah. So right now we're working on a bunch of rental properties that we purchased, and we can dive more into this, in detail later. But
Hmm.
essentially, we're doing the burst strategy, right? So
Hmm.
we're buying them at a discounted price, adding value through the rehab process, and then
Hmm.
kind of refinancing out of them. So we have numerous properties that we're working on right now. And so for
Nice.
the next month, the goal would be to kind of close out those deals and
Hmm.
get some more flips going. Um, because the flips actually this year haven't been as we haven't done as many flips as we
Mm.
wanted to, but we've
Hmm.
done more rental properties than we've wanted
Mm.
to. So
Interesting.
kind of like averages itself out.
Yeah. I'm
So
curious to dive in later on how the Burr strategy has still been working
yeah.
given today's market conditions too.
Yeah.
Because I've done that as well. And I think generally speaking, it's not as easy to do right now. I'd say real estate investing is not as easy to do as it was 5, 10 years ago. So obviously you've got to be good to continue to be profitable and productive.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so and I can't wait to jump in and figure out how like the mindset around kind of deciding when to work, leave your job. Essentially, you were
Mhm.
working for somebody else and then you weren't. And that's a
Yeah.
big decision and a big
It's huge.
transition. But before we get there, let's jump into your backstory a little bit. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll just start at the beginning, right? So um I wanted to talk about my faith a lot as well because it's
Yeah.
something that's really important to me. So grew up in a Christian family, Christian home. Always, going to church, um, doing all those types of things. I think I accepted Jesus into my heart when I was pretty young, like 4 or 5, right?
Hmm.
And you kind of go almost like go with the flow, right?
Hmm.
With your family, right? Your parents, not that they force you to go to church, but
Yeah.
it's just you're going to church because your family's going, right? It's
And you're
like
kind
a
of
5 year old.
going through the motions.
Right, right.
You haven't,
So
you haven't researched as a 5-year-old, like you haven't researched like Islam and any other
yeah, 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 exactly,
religion out
right.
there. So
So
yeah,
so
makes
you kind
sense.
of just follow in your parents' footsteps, right?
Sure.
And that's I feel like how my faith was growing up. And then at some point, you have to turn your parents' faith into your own, right? Like, and whether that's when you go off to college or whatever, you move out of the house, like your parents aren't forcing you to go to church anymore, right? You have to decide to make that step yourself.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because that's a little bit later
Hmm.
on, but
Yeah.
let me just kind of go through my journey. So, and this kind of relates to the real estate, some of my background. I started getting interested, honestly, in construction and real estate type stuff when I was
Hmm.
pretty young. We had an addition put on my parents' house. It was an in-law suite, and I think I was, I don't know, 11, 12 maybe, and I just was fascinated watching the process
Mm.
and seeing like the different phases and watching the framing go up, and because it was at our house, right? I got to see the
Hmm.
whole process.
Hmm.
And that was just such an intriguing experience for me. And so I think that kind of started the gears turning in my head, like
Hmm.
how can I do this type of stuff? I've always been kind of an active guy.
Hmm.
I've always liked working with my hands, been an athlete, right? I'm not
Hmm.
like a sit at your desk type of guy, which is
Yeah.
oddly enough what
Hmm.
I do
What you're
mostly
doing now.
now. Yeah.
Right.
So got involved in, I think when I was 16 years old, I started working at a construction company, remodeling company. We
Hmm.
installed kitchens,
I mean,
just
Jesus was a
primarily.
carpenter. I'm
Hey, that's right.
just
I'm
saying, right?
just trying to follow in his
Just-
footsteps, man. So, and we actually, for that company, we worked on a house that the guy who owned the company, he was flipping in
Okay.
Baltimore City. I have no clue. He could have made $100,000 or lost 20 grand. I have no clue. But what I
Right.
do know is I was like, man, this is awesome. Like I don't have
Hmm.
to work for a client, right? We have free
Mm.
access to the house. Because in home renovations, it's tough sometimes working with clients. Not that they're tough people. I mean, there are tough clients, right?
Sure.
But you have to work around them and
Right.
their schedule and all that type of stuff. So that part of the house flipping intrigued me early on.
Yeah, because
Um,
this is it's a vacant property. That's
right.
an investment property.
Yep.
It's
You could
not a
work at 10
retail.
p.m. if you wanted, as long as you're
Sure.
not
Making too much noise.
yeah, bothering the neighbors, right?
Yeah.
Um, so but I never really took the action to make those steps happen to like get into the real estate field.
Hmm.
Um, and this is kind of where some of the mindset stuff comes into play, right?
Hmm.
I realized, I don't know, 8 years ago or something, that I am just a life procrastinator.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is just everything I do. It's like, oh, I can do that tomorrow. Like I'll do that
Hmm.
later. I'll do that later. And that's how I was like my whole life, right? Um, and it kind of affected my grades in school and things
Mm.
like that. Like I just didn't. I was like, oh, I'll do that later. And then the next thing you know, I have to write a 10-page paper in
Hmm.
one
Right.
night, and it's like you got to cram it in. And
Yeah.
um, so I had to shift my mindset at some point, and that happens kind of later on in my story. But
Hmm.
um, kind of worked for construction companies off and
Yeah.
on throughout my early adulthood. Yeah, I actually have a college degree in cybersecurity, and it has
Oh,
been
really?
collecting dust on my shelf the
That's
entire
right.
time.
I think I remember when you were doing that, I think.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's one of those things where it took me 8 years to get the degree, just because, like I said, I didn't care about the classes. I
yeah.
wasn't doing well. I was taking off semesters, going back, and I felt like um, I was kind of um, trying to follow in the footsteps of my brother, my older
Mm.
brother. He's 7 years
Okay.
older than I am. and he's a computer engineer, and I'm like, oh man, like I got to do that because I
Hmm.
look up to him and all that. And then
Yeah.
I finally realized that like that's just not me. I got to
Sure.
pursue what I want to do, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, and
so
so
what's
just I like, and because I observed you, I mean, you were the main person, honestly, consistently working in our house, and that's a small, window into your life. But
right?
what I observed is you were always on time, always working hard. So I don't want the listener to get the impression that you're saying you were lazy, like from a day-to-day physical standpoint. But and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm gathering is maybe from a strategy or life, like big picture
Correct.
intentionality type thing, like who am I really, what skills, what's my mission here, what's my purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe that was, you were avoiding that and pushing that off. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I've always been a really hard worker. Like
Yeah.
when I'm doing something, it's like I try to put my all into it.
Yeah.
But I think I just lacked the mental um,
Like hurt.
savvy of like
Yeah.
how can I improve my life, or how can I,
Hmm.
what do I actually want? It's just you
Sure.
just kind of going with the flow.
Well, and as
Um,
much as I want to pile on and beat you up, no, I'm kidding. But I think that's super common, right? It's
yeah,
it's just it's pretty. I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that, so
yeah.
that makes sense.
So kind of working through my life, right? I'm 16. I was a carpenter. Moving into like my early 20s, I went through a period where like I stopped going to church probably
Hmm.
for about 5 years.
Hmm.
And I just wasn't following Jesus. Like to me, like as
Hmm.
a Christian, like my sole purpose is to follow Jesus and to trust in him as my savior, right? I'm a sinner. I need to follow Jesus. I need to put my faith in him that he is my savior, right? And I still think I knew those things and I still
Hmm.
believed those things, but I wasn't like, if you looked at my life, you would have said like this guy's not doing
Sure.
what he believes in, right? I was I was living out, on my own with a couple other guys. We
Hmm.
were drinking, smoking
Yeah.
weed like every day, like just doing all these like crazy things, right? And I won't dive like too much into that, but
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
it was an issue. Like
Hmm.
it was I was addicted to I was addicted to weed. Like I felt like I had to smoke every single day to get through. It's not like a physical addiction, it's like a mental
Yeah.
addiction type thing, right?
Like a dependency or
Yeah.
something.
And so that I mean that I think that was part of what affected my mindset of like, I'm just smoking and having a good time, right?
Sure. It was a
Um
short-term, day-to-day
yeah. Yep.
mindset.
And then sort of in my later 20s, I I came back to the church, and kind of rededicated my faith in Jesus and kind of stopped all that type of stuff. um, I'm not
What do you
thankful.
think was what was the change? Like why because I think it's easy to go drift away. So
Yeah,
I'm not quite as interested in why that happened, but why
yeah.
did you come back?
I just always knew that it wasn't right. Like so that
Hmm.
as a Christian, you believe in like the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit works in your
Hmm.
heart. And I constantly felt this tug on my heart,
Hmm.
like, hey, what are you
Tension.
doing? Like, yeah, like
Yeah.
let's go here. And I just was kind of, it's like I said, I'm a procrastinator. I was like, you know what? I can go back to church tomorrow. You know, I'm still a Christian,
Sure.
but I'm just gonna put that off. I don't feel like doing that right now,
Right. Well, your
And
your sins are forgiven, right? So
right, yeah, absolutely. And
right.
yeah, that's how it works, right? Like
Sure.
God forgives all of our sins through Jesus,
Right.
but it's you can't just say, oh, my sins are forgiven, let me go, do all these crazy things, right?
Yeah, that's something that
um
gets left out these days is the repentance
right.
side of things, but
Yep.
I'll stay off my soapbox for now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, one thing that I attribute it to, so I um my brother was a missionary,
Hmm.
and he ended up coming back to the States, for good, and he invited me to come play soccer Soccer
Okay.
is one of my greatest passions in life. Like
Uh-huh.
I still play today.
Nice.
Played all through high school. I
Hmm.
played 1 year in college at just a community college. It was no big deal,
Hmm.
but nothing like your story with,
Still impressive though.
yeah. So he invited me to come play soccer with this young adults group at the church.
Hmm.
And I started, playing soccer, and then I started going to the church where the young adults were from, and
Hmm.
that's kind of how I came back.
Gotcha.
I just, I think I felt for a while like I wouldn't be accepted because of I knew
Mm.
the things that I had been doing, right?
Hmm.
But that's a false reality that
Sure.
we try to maybe that was just an excuse, like, hey, I'm not going to be accepted, I'm not going to go back to church, right? But I felt
Right.
accepted in this group, and so I
Hmm.
felt like, hey, I'm gonna go back to church and see how it
Yeah.
is, and it's been like, I feel like my faith is so much stronger and different now than it was prior to this, just
Hmm.
because I went through this time of darkness. It helped me realize my actual need for Jesus.
Mm.
A lot of
So
times,
what, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, a lot of times if you grow up in a Christian home and you don't have a period of darkness, you kind of
Yeah.
just, like I said, go with the flow, right?
Yeah. You take it
But
for
I
granted.
realized in my own mind how much I needed him.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha. What, approximately what year was this that we're talking about that you kind of returned to the faith?
um probably about 8 years ago.
Okay. That's
So
got it.
yeah,
Got it. So you were working on my
I
house
was
during
probably
that.
working on your house. Yeah.
It's
Hey,
20,
I wasn't smoking on the
2014.
job. I wasn't
No,
smoking
no.
on the job. Only after.
Um, Gotcha. No, so, and look, yeah, I just did a 10-week small group at my church called Rooted. I think it's a national program, but um I mean, some of the, not that you want to get into comparing too much, but some of the stories that I think we all have this kind of natural, like, oh, I'm not good enough. Everybody in the group's going to know more of the Bible than I do, or something like something along those lines of, I don't measure up, or I've done too many bad things to be accepted. And then, man, once you get to know like these other guys in the group I was in, wow, it's like some of the stuff they've been through or have
Hmm.
chosen to do. And again, I'm not putting I'm not minimizing things I've done or anything, but it's just like, okay, we've all fallen short, right?
Yep.
So that's really comforting once you realize that nobody can really throw the first stone, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and something I relate to, like your podcast, From Adversity to Abundance,
yeah.
is, I went from this time where I had, so two of the friends that I was hanging out with at that
Hmm.
time have passed away from drug overdoses.
Wow.
And like, to think that like that could have
Wow.
been me, right?
Yeah,
Now they were involved in some other crazier stuff that I
other,
was
yeah,
never really involved in,
sure.
but I could have easily
You could have gone down that path.
gone down that path. And um it's just something I think about. It's like, man,
Yeah,
I to go from like this dark time in my place where I could have died maybe, right, to where I am today. And I still have, I still have a ton of room to grow, right, in my faith,
for sure.
in my business, in being a good spouse, and father. Like, all those areas I still need to grow in.
Hmm.
But it's good to look back and look where you came
Yeah,
from,
for
because
sure.
it's like, man, look where I was and look where I am now.
Yeah. Well, I haven't read the book, The Gap and the Gain. I should,
Oh,
but
dude,
I've read
it
a
is
couple of.
it is a great book. It's a
Okay,
great
well,
book. I
that's
just recently read it like a couple months
nice.
ago.
Awesome. That's just what popped in my head when you
Yeah.
just talked about that. Looking back and appreciating how far you have come and how much
Hmm.
growth has been accomplished, if you will. Um, is important. And I know as entrepreneurs, it's very easy not to do that. It's very easy
Yep.
to just look forward, and just the next deal. Okay, so let's cover the last 8 years, both from like a mental fitness standpoint and an actual real estate investing standpoint. Um, First, how did you decide to quit your job, what did that look like?
Yeah, it was so right when COVID started,
Yeah.
I was working for a remodeling company, and we had a furlough.
Hmm.
I don't know, it was maybe 8 weeks or something.
Hmm.
Um, and it gave me a lot of time to think about what I wanted, right? And
Hmm.
I had a lot of free time to kind of do some research.
Sure.
About a year or so prior to this happening, I had been listening to podcasts. Like Bigger
Hmm.
Pockets was a big one that I started
Hmm.
listening to, and started reading a lot of books. And I'll be honest with you, prior to me like listening to Bigger Pockets, I don't know the last book, or if I ever read a book for pleasure or for like to
Like
gain knowledge. It
by
was like,
choice,
yeah,
right?
hey, you have to read this book for school,
Right.
and I'm gonna cliff note it and barely
Right.
read it anyway, right? So like
Reports due
that
tomorrow.
is, yeah, that is me. And I mean, part of it was because like I always struggled with reading. Like my reading
Uh-huh.
comprehension was never the greatest. And so I would read something, and then a page later I'm like, I have no clue what I just read. And so it's
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
why should I read? I'm not gonna understand this stuff.
Sure.
Um, but on Bigger Pockets, they always ask each guest, or they
Hmm.
used to. I don't know if they still do,
Yeah.
but
I don't know either.
what are your top three books that you like to read? And one of the ones I kept hearing was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Hmm.
So that
Sure.
was the first book that I had read, and it like blew my mind just to think differently, right? Like how
Right.
I had been thinking about assets and liabilities and just the
Yep.
different mindset of thinking.
Yep.
And so after I read that book, I just started reading all these other books and
Sure.
listening to podcasts and stuff. And um, I was trying to just gain as much knowledge as I could before making the jump into real estate.
Sure.
I
And
have a good. Oh, good.
well, I think I had a similar, might have been a little bit earlier, but of course I'm a little bit older than you too. But no, similar thing
You
where
don't
it's
look
just
it.
a mindset shift, and it's just like you surround yourself, it's not like just changing your thoughts by itself can just make you wealthy overnight or something like that,
Right.
or just create success instantly. Of course, that's kind of ridiculous, but I mean, but it's amazing how your thoughts do lead to your actions and your behaviors and your habits, which is really what ends up producing results. So I know we're gonna get there, but I had a similar kind of, I guess, mental transition in around 2014. Yeah, right. Probably when you were working at our house, but 2014, 2015 is when I really started getting serious about listening to Bigger Pockets podcasts, different podcasts and reading books. And it just, the mental shift that it creates for you when you change your thought environment is, you can't be overemphasized. It's just so valuable.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I think
yeah,
a lot of people like who don't do that type of stuff think
yeah,
that it's kind of bogus. Like, oh,
yeah,
your mindset. But I mean, it is so true. Obviously, you still have to take action, right? You can't just
right,
have this great mindset and all of a sudden things are going to start happening, right?
right,
But it's like
exactly.
I don't know, I don't remember who said the quote. It's like whether you think you can or you can't,
Hmm.
you're
You're
right.
probably right. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like
absolutely.
you have, and I think some of it's a confidence thing too, right?
Sure.
Confidence is a huge momentum
It's
builder
huge
in my opinion, in
for
anything,
sure.
in sports, in business. Just it's a great mindset tool.
Yep, for sure. And I know for me, it's I switched to, okay, I stopped, and it's easy. Like this isn't. I still fall into the negative mindset stuff. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm
Me
just
too, me
saying
too.
I'm perfect with this. But I definitely had an intentional shift toward, wait a minute, what are my strengths? Who's on my team? Okay, my father has been a real estate agent for decades. I used to work for a title company and a mortgage broker. That I never considered that a real strength, right? Or valuable experience. Um, all these things, you just start looking at your network and who's on my side. What resources do I have? And it does create a shift toward the positive and toward confidence of maybe I can do this first deal, something like that, as
Right.
opposed to, oh, I have to work this full-time job and I don't have time, or, it's just a mental shift, which is really powerful. So you started listening to all these podcasts, reading books. For me, cash flow quadrant was actually more powerful. I liked Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it is definitely a mental, like it encourages you to think differently.
Hmm.
Um, but I liked getting into the kind of the difference between an entrepreneur, self-employed business owner, investor, and employee, I think are the four, but
Yeah,
in his
that's a good
other
book as
book.
well. Yep.
So take it from there. What, how did that kind of the education and intention of soaking up all this real estate investing knowledge, how did that eventually turn into you quitting your job and maybe doing your first deal?
Yeah. So early 20, when did COVID hit? 2020. So early
Yeah.
2020, um, I was up late, like, researching stuff and kind of trying to figure things out. And I just pulled the trigger. I was like, I'm gonna start an LLC. And I don't advise like making big life decisions without
Hmm.
consulting your spouse. Like, and my
Right.
wife has been absolutely amazing, like biggest support of mine.
Hmm.
Because it hasn't been easy on her either. The transition, like it doesn't just affect me, right? It affects her and our whole family.
Yeah.
Um, but I woke up the next day. I was like, hey, I created an LLC. She's like, you did what? Like what?
Mm.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
I mean, she was on board, but it just was like a surprise to her. But
Sure.
I just was sick of not taking action, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
huge thing is the analysis paralysis. You can think about something so much
Hmm.
that you overanalyze and you just don't take the action. Now I'm not
Sure.
saying just do things without thinking about it, right? But you can only think about something so long and then you just have to do it. And you're going to make
Yep.
mistakes, right? But that's how you learn. You know, you're going to
Yeah.
figure it out, right? So I started this LLC, and I think something that's interesting, and for anybody who's not an entrepreneur yet or is like trying to get started, you don't have to have any money to to start
Hmm.
stuff. Like I literally had no money to start the business. Like we had money, right? But I didn't want to use like our savings or anything. I wanted to try to get it started. So
Hmm.
I had an agreement with my wife. I was like, all right, I'll figure out how to get the money to start the LLC and the business on my own. So
Hmm.
I took a bunch of old Pokemon cards and video games and sold them on eBay and made enough money. I think it was like 1,500 or 2,000 bucks to kind of like start the LLC and get things going. And so I just want to, I don't want new entrepreneurs to like be like, oh, I don't have any money. Like, how am I going to get this started? Just figure it out, and that's
Hmm.
what I did, right? Um, so I bought my first property in 2020. I think May or something. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
We also had a baby, like right around that time. So there was a lot of stuff
Yeah.
going on.
Well,
Okay.
especially with COVID, there's a lot
Yeah.
going on there.
Right. So we got COVID. Right.
Yeah.
We have no help from our family,
Hmm.
because it's like we couldn't really see each other. We have a new baby. I'm trying to
Right.
start this business. I'm still working a full W-2 job. Right.
Hmm.
Um, and I was trying to do all of that at once, and I
Hmm.
felt like I just wasn't doing a good job at anything because it's like I
Yeah.
had too much stuff going on, right? Like I wasn't home very much. I wasn't helpful to my wife and the kid.
Hmm.
I I was going to my W-2 job, but I wasn't fully mentally there because I was also trying to do this flip at the same time, right? And so I think maybe in September, I realized it is I have to quit. Like I cannot do both at the same time. And
Hmm.
I just took that leap of faith, which
Hmm.
it was tough. It was really tough. My wife was working at the time, so it made it a little bit
Gotcha.
easier, right? So
Uh-huh.
because when you go into real estate, if you're going to flip a house or anything, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a paycheck for however long that first flip takes, right? And so I don't think I paid myself for the first 5 months that I started it, but it did help out that my wife was still
Was
working, right?
working.
So, yeah.
And
And so yeah,
who
so it was definitely tough.
can you say who you were working for?
I can. Do you want me to?
Sure.
Smith House.
Yeah, so we had Dave Smith on a prior episode for the listener to go check that one
Yeah,
out. Um,
great
but I think
company.
it's, yeah, great company. They do fantastic work, and in Maryland, custom high-end remodeling. Um, and I think maybe some ground up construction. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it's cool that like, and obviously you could speak more to this than I can, but you had exposure to the investment side of things before, and now even if Dave isn't specifically in, in real estate investing, their company, I mean, he built that from scratch. And
Hmm.
I know you were a big part of the growth of that, his company. So I just think from an entrepreneurship standpoint, you got to see some of the ups and downs and the pain points
Absolutely.
and the
Yep.
successes of Smith House and the growth they've had. So I'm sure that benefited you as well. Um, Speak to, so people say, well, don't quit your job, and there's no one size fits all, right? We know that there's everybody's situation is different,
Hmm.
but people say, well, wait till you have enough, income that matches your W-2 income from your side hustle before you quit. We know what you actually did, but what would you say to that about that guidance?
Yeah, I would just say sometimes I think people use stuff like that as an excuse because they're just afraid, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I think if you say, I need to get to this before I do this, that can hold you back,
Yeah.
right? So it's going to be a risk, right? I mean, to me, it's kind of like a slightly high risk, but even higher reward.
Hmm.
You might have to take a step back, right? So I would say if you have some reserves in the bank, right, for
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 months worth of living, right, can
Yeah.
you afford or can you stomach to not have a paycheck for that
Hmm.
amount of time,
Right.
knowing that you're going to come out on the other end and start to
Yeah.
rise, right? You're investing in yourself, right? So you got to believe in
You're
yourself.
betting on
And
yourself.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's kind of the mindset thing too, is you have
Sure.
to, if you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else believe in you that you can do it, right? So you
Hmm.
have to,
Yeah.
I mean, don't be arrogant about it, right? But like
Right.
you have to have this mindset of I'm going to get this done no matter
Hmm.
what. And to me, it was like I'm willing to do anything I have to do
Hmm.
because I know it falls on my shoulders to provide for my family.
Hmm.
There's
Love
nothing
that.
that I'm not willing to do. Like
Yeah.
I will never go back to a W-2 job, even if my like real estate career like failed.
Hmm.
Not because I didn't, I mean, my employer was great, right? But like,
Hmm.
it's the freedom and the ability to kind of build my own thing that I was looking for.
Yeah. Love that.
And it was definitely hard early on.
Hmm.
It put some stress on our family, on our
Hmm.
marriage, just because I wasn't there as much as I wanted to be.
Hmm.
Um, so that was tough. That was probably
Yeah.
one of the hardest things. But
As far
now
as,
I'm able to be home more than I was before.
yeah, that's awesome. And when people talk about that income, matching your income thing, I just always think, well, okay, if you're matching, let's say Mark, you were making 75,000 working for Smith House. Obviously, I'm just making numbers up,
How
but
did you know?
I had no idea. Dave always sends me everyone's paycheck. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
right, right, right.
Um, it was just a guess, but and then you're making 75,000 consistently through your flips. I know that's like nothing's consistent with flipping, but and then you quit your W-2. Well, you still lost $75,000 in income. So you're still like taking a big cut when you quit your W-2. So
Right.
no
That's a
matter
good point.
what, it's like it's not like it's just, oh, you feel no pain when you quit your W-2 from an income standpoint. So the point is there's never a perfect time to do it. And I am not sitting here saying everyone should immediately quit your jobs and go jump into
That would
entrepreneurship,
be
because
silly. Yeah.
trust me, it is not easy, and it absolutely can have an impact on your marriage and your relationships, and can be super stressful, just entrepreneurship in general. So I like to keep it real on the show, and it's not all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, and um, but I 100% agree with you. I mean, most people are just procrastinating if they think they want to be an entrepreneur and they're not doing it yet. Do it now or do it in the next year. Set it up in the next year to be able to quit your job if this is really what you want to do, and bet on yourself. And here's the thing. I know you said you never work a W-2 again, but let's say it just absolutely failed. Your business was a total failure, and then you tried another one, total failure. Do you do you think you could get a job like you had before?
Oh, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
honestly think like I bring more value to the team now than I did before, right? Because
Yeah,
I have a different
totally.
mindset. I know what it takes to run a business, and that's something that I can always fall back onto, right? And
Hmm.
so that was my mindset. Like
Hmm.
if it fails, if I need to go
Right.
back, I can. I know, I know several companies that would probably hire me
Hmm.
in a heartbeat, right? And
Yeah.
so that gives me
That's
a
a
little bit of
even
comfort. Yeah.
even if is what I like to say. Even if
Yep.
this happens, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but um there's I don't know if it's anybody has this quote, but I heard it on like a motivation. I listen to a lot of like motivational like
hmm,
compilations of people actually on YouTube.
hmm,
And the one guy said, if not now, when? Right.
hmm,
So it's like now, when is the time? Now is the time. If you really want to be an entrepreneur,
hmm,
figure it out. Don't quit your job today, right? But sit down now and figure out like what is it going to take for me to
hmm.
take those steps, right?
Sure.
It might be a month from now, it might be 2 months, but like make that sit down now and figure
Right.
out what are you looking for. It's different for everybody, right? What you
Right.
want is different than what I want, so it's going to look
Sure.
differently, but the steps are the same. You got to take action. You got to have
Yeah.
a a goal in mind of what you're looking for.
Right. Instead of having like, I should quit my job someday mindset,
Yeah, yeah,
it's okay, not today, but okay, I want to do it in 6 months. Okay,
yeah.
then backwards in the military, we had
Reverse engineer.
backwards, right? Backwards planning because we were in the army, and that those were more simple terms than reverse engineering. But yeah, you like, okay, then what do I need to accomplish in 5 months? Then what do I need to accomplish in 4 months? And three, two, one. What do I need to do today? Then, right?
Right.
Um, okay, so your first deal, how did that go? And then I know you had a major loss on a deal at Deep Creek I want to get to.
It's
So
exciting. It's good stuff.
yeah, let's focus on your
Yeah.
losses
Can
right
we
now.
not talk about that one? No, just kidding. Yeah, so I'll kind of dive into a little bit about like
Yeah.
how I funded it and all that type of stuff, because there's
Hmm.
a lot of different ways to do things. And
Yeah.
there's more than one way to skin a cat in terms
Yeah.
of real estate.
Now, is
Lots of
this is your first deal that we're talking about?
Yep,
Just to
yeah.
clarify.
So my
Yeah.
very first deal, I think purchase price was around 100,000. We bought
Hmm.
it off the MLS
Okay.
on an auction site, Hubzu.
Okay.
Um, and um, I had my agent, like my good friend was an agent, and we used to like just go look at properties, and this one kind of like fit our criteria. So we bid on it, had to up our bid a little bit, but ended up getting it. Immediately had buyer's remorse. I was like, what am I doing? I'm
Mm.
buying this house. I have no clue what I'm doing, right? I was sometimes I still get nervous when I buy a
Yeah.
deal. It's like, is this going to be good or bad? Who knows? Um, but I had no money. Like I said before, I had like $0 to my name in terms of the business, right? Like, I
Right.
have my own personal savings or whatever, but
Hmm.
$0 in the business right now
Hmm.
because we're just starting. So I'm like, all right, how do I do this? Right. It's not like it's the rich dad poor dad mindset. Like, oh, I can't
Hmm.
do this because I don't have money. Well, I don't have money, so how can I do this? Right.
Hmm.
I had another friend who wanted to get into real estate, but was working a full-time job and didn't have time, but he had the cash available. So I coupled his cash. So he funded all of it's called like gap funding, right? So
Okay.
when you
Hmm.
when you buy a property, typically a lot of investors or most investors will use what's called hard money,
Hmm.
and you pay a premium for the interest, and they charge that upfront fee to use their money.
Hmm.
Um, and it's generally more expensive if you've done no deals, right? So,
Hmm.
but more deals you get, the less expensive it gets, and it gets easier
Hmm.
to come by. But
Sure.
they won't lend on the entire deal. Generally, they'll lend like up to 90% of the purchase price, and then like maybe 100% of the rehab, right? So I have to come with 10% down and pay for closing costs. So I
Hmm.
used my friend
Hmm.
to and say, hey man, like you go into this property, you fund all of the money I need, and we'll split the cost 50-50 of the profit, whatever that is.
Hmm.
And he was like, all right, let's do it. So, and I did all the work, right?
Hmm.
I'm a licensed contractor myself. So I did a lot of the work myself, but I obviously had to sub out like some of the trades and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So halfway through the deal, I was like, okay, this 50-50 split scenario is not going to work in the future. I wasn't going to back out
Hmm.
on it now. So I
Sure.
went to him and said, hey, I know this is working now, but in the future, like this is not going to work. Just because it was a ton of work, right? And
And mind
he
you, I
wasn't
want to just, and this was 2020 still, just to paint the picture. So it's like everything, like the world was shut down. Like,
right.
so just the fact that you're still taking action, I think is impressive because
Yeah,
it'd be so easy to say, well, let's see how the next year shakes out with market conditions and things. And
right.
so just want to point that out, that the fact that you're still moving forward during that time, is just impressive. All
Yeah.
right. So you're doing all the work, you bring the sweat equity, he put the money up, and you're
Yep.
supposed to do a 50-50 split of the profits. Yep.
Yep. So we get to the end, we list the property, and I think, I mean, this is when the real estate market like just skyrocketed,
Oh, right.
and
Right.
everything was going for over asking. I don't remember exactly. I think it was like 20 or 30K over asking, which I almost like fell off my chair when my agent called me and said, "Oh, we got this offer in." I'm like, "Oh wow." Now we didn't make that much money. I think we only made like 40 grand. So like, had we not got the over asking that we got,
Hmm.
like it wouldn't have been that great of a deal. But
Right.
my mindset was, if I break even on this first deal, like that was my goal. I don't want to
Hmm.
lose money on this first deal. I just want to
Yeah.
get a deal under my belt. If I break even, I've learned the process. I've built some relationships. That was my, bottom line.
Hmm.
So to walk away with, I guess 20 grand from the sale, like a
Yeah.
little less than 20 grand from it, um, was huge. Was a huge win for me.
Absolutely. I mean, plus you
So
got the education, you started your track record to
right,
say, hey, I have this successful deal under my belt for the next one, and you made money. I mean, that's win, win, win.
yeah, yep. And I still use the same guy as like a
Hmm.
private lender. It's just not an equity based lending. It's just an
Gotcha.
interest type thing.
Yeah, it's a loan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how my first deal went, and I was hooked after that. It's like, okay, how do I keep doing this? Now they're
Sure.
obviously, and we'll get into this, they're not all wins, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes you lose money, but
Yeah.
sometimes
But
you
I think
sometimes you
that's interesting. An interesting point though is because is the fact that that can, if you'd lost 20 grand on your first deal, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I do think about that. It's like, okay, if you lose 20, 30, 40 grand on your first flip, like that might be it for you, to be
Yeah,
honest. And so I think that's what
absolutely.
scares a lot of people away. But,
Hmm. Yeah,
you know,
yeah. Obviously, that's not what happened. So, okay. And then how many deals did you do before you got to the deal we're not going to talk about?
I don't know, maybe another 5 deals or so.
Hmm. Okay.
Um,
S- And just to your goal with all this, your strategy is what? Fix and flip and then peel off some rentals if it makes sense, or what's your approach big picture?
yeah, big picture is rental portfolio. Like that's big picture.
Hmm.
I want to have a rental portfolio, maybe up to at least 60 rentals, 60 doors. Because
Hmm.
then I think that gets me the truly passive net income
Hmm.
that I'm looking for. Now,
Yeah,
I say passive, that's a
it's not
full-time
passive,
job.
but
If I'm managing those
right.
properties, that's a full-time job just to manage 60
Right.
rentals, right? But where I don't have to look for other deals and it
Hmm.
provides the income that I need.
Yeah.
And that's my long-term retirement, right?
Hmm.
So in 30
Gotcha.
years, I'm 30, I'll be 36 this year, actually tomorrow.
Oh,
I'll be
happy birthday.
36. Thank you. And so in 30 years, in theory, all of these rentals are going to be paid off because that's generally what I do as a 30-year mortgage,
Uh-huh.
30-year note.
Yeah.
Um, it'd be nicer if we paid them off earlier, right? If we get a lump sum of, cash, like maybe we throw some of that cash at them to kind of pay them down a little bit more. But in theory, in 30 years, like they're all going to be cash flowing a significant amount, right? So that's my retirement.
Yeah.
And I can sell one property probably per year. And
Yeah.
just from the sale of that property, it probably pays for my expenses for that whole year. So that's kind of my mindset of like
Yeah.
why I want a rental
Absolutely.
portfolio and why I've chosen like 60 doors is kind of like the
Got
minimum
it.
that if I get to 60, I could stop.
Hmm.
And that's not just like a, hey, I want 60 doors. I've thought through like
Right.
the
The
process of,
reason behind
yeah,
it.
how much money do I need? How much are they going to bring in? All that stuff.
Sure. And so, but in 2020, you might have been a little more focused on flips because you needed the income,
Correct.
uh, the large chunk of capital that comes in all at once to pay your bills
Yep.
for your
Yeah.
family things.
So in 2020, I think I just did that one flip.
Okay,
And
got
then
it.
in 2021 is when I started ramping up. Like, I think we did like 5 rental properties in 2021.
Nice.
Um, it's hard for me to keep track of like the
Yeah,
years. Like, it just kind of all like
right.
melds together, right? Um, and then, I think we did like 4 or 5 flips that year. Um, but it's hard for me to remember
Sure.
chronologically what happens like when, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the general
Well,
idea.
I'm helping you work on your story.
Yeah, that's
But
right.
so okay, let's talk about Deep Creek, the deal we
Oh
said we're
man,
not going to
it's a
talk
gut
about.
punch. A gut
Yeah.
punch.
Adversity to abundance, right?
That's right.
That's the point of the show, is to talk about the real, pain points in some of this stuff. Because if you can't handle, you know, pain points and adversity, you should not be an entrepreneur. I
No,
mean, you
it's an
should not.
everyday
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. So, um, what happened? What was the talk us through the details on this Deep Creek deal.
Yeah,
Deep
so
Creek, Maryland. Sorry, but Deep Creek, Maryland, for those listening who are not familiar, is a popular vacation spot on a lake in Western Maryland that can be nice in both all seasons, really. So it's
yep.
pretty, and
Yeah,
it's
it's got
really
a
grown a lot.
ski resort close by. It's got a nice lake.
Yep.
Yeah, here's the deal, okay? We bought we bought a property that we turned into an Airbnb. Like, that was the goal.
Hmm.
So, because we like the Deep Creek area. We wanted
Hmm.
a kind of like a vacation house that we could go to that was also cash flowing. So it was
Yeah.
like, okay, Deep Creek's a pretty good Airbnb spot. So we bought this house. It was tough to find like contractors and people to work on it because it's we're in Baltimore and it's like 3 hours away, right, from where we live.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was just a hard process to find that. But then we finally
Hmm.
eventually found the people that we needed to use, and things were moving and grooving. The property turned out well, air quotes.
Hmm.
It appraised for significantly more than what I thought it would. And so
Okay.
if people don't understand the process of like burring, which is the
Hmm.
buy,
Yeah.
rehab, rent, refinance, repeat strategy,
Yeah.
the goal is to buy houses under value, add value, and then refinance out of your short-term hard money loan
Hmm.
and cash out all of the cash that you've invested and sometimes more, right?
Hmm.
So it appraised for such, and it's all driven on the appraised value. The appraisal
Hmm.
after you fix it up is
After
what
you,
drives everything, right?
the ARV, right?
The ARV, yeah. So it appraised for significantly more than what I thought it would. And I was like blown away. I'm like, man, I need to buy all these properties in Deep Creek because this thing is
What
insane.
kind of what kind of numbers are we talking about? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
so it appraised. I think we bought it for like 100,000 and maybe put 150 into it,
Oh wow.
and it appraised for like 480 or something crazy.
Whoa. Wow.
So we cashed out a significant amount of money. Um,
Sure.
after now those numbers sounds like, oh, it cost 100,000, you put 150 into it, well, you made like $200,000. Well, that's not true because there's a lot of other
Hmm.
lender fees and like all these other things. So I
Holding
think it was closer,
costs.
yeah, holding costs. It was probably closer to like 60,000 or something that we cashed out. So
Okay.
essentially we had this cash flowing Airbnb that
Hmm.
we got paid $60,000 essentially,
Yeah.
right, to own. I mean, it's not like income, but it's because
Hmm.
you just have a different loan, so you've leveraged a different loan to
Hmm.
to basically have a little bit more money.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, wow, this is incredible. I'm gonna start investing heavily in Deep Creek, right?
Hmm.
Well, here's the issue, and for any new investors out there, you got to know your area that you're
Mm,
investing in. I thought I knew it because I had done one deal and I was, puffing my chest out and was
right.
like, man, I can do anything up here. Well, come to find out, like, the contract that we had used did not do a good job.
Mm,
And we didn't know this until afterwards, right? Like the kitchen sink was never connected to the main drain, and we had a garbage disposal. So there was like, we were like, what is that smell? Like we went up there, there was all this food in the crawl space. I'm like, dude, come on.
wow.
So what happened was we bought another property up there because I was
Hmm.
like, I need to start heavily investing in Deep Creek. It it wasn't as close to the lake,
Hmm.
and so the market like right around the lake is very good because that's where people investors buy there, right? But
Hmm.
we were maybe this new property was maybe 10 minutes off the lake,
Hmm.
whereas the first property was like right on the lake, right?
Hmm.
Totally different market, even though it's like fairly close, right? Like
Hmm.
in Baltimore, if
Yeah.
you have a house
Baltimore's
that's,
very block by block.
yeah, right. So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Whereas it might be the same zip code, but it's like totally different
Yeah, my
value,
brother
right?
has a house in Little Italy, and if you go a little bit northeast, it's extremely different.
Yeah. So I experienced that, um, firsthand. So we bought this property, had the same contractor that we worked on before. This was prior to us realizing his quality of work was
Hmm.
not great. Um, and we put it on the market. So we finished the rehab, put it on the market, and I think we put it on for like 325. And this was back in like September or October or November or sometime towards the winter season.
Hmm.
And we had like one showing in several weeks. And this is
Wow.
when the market was like, you know, you get
Yeah.
30 showings in a
Lots of
weekend
offers.
and, multiple offers and you're under contract in less than a week.
Not a good
And
sign.
yeah, not a good sign. So then we dropped the price by like 25,000.
Hmm.
Still not many showings. Dropped the price
Hmm.
another 25,000. Still not many showings. So like we dropped it 75 grand, right? And we were projecting to make like 50 off of it at our original price. This was the
Wow.
flip that we were working on, just so I'm clear.
Right. Yeah. You still
So
have
now
the short-term rental that you can use, right? At this point,
I
I'm
still
saying
at this point,
at the not today. I'm
right, at
saying at this
this
time,
point, still had the short-term rental up there,
right.
right?
And you're trying to sell
Which,
this flip at the same
yep,
time.
and the short-term rental was going okay. It wasn't
Uh-huh.
cash flowing as much as we wanted, but it was
Right.
still cash flowing, so we were fine there.
Gotcha. Yep.
So in my mind, I'm freaking out because I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, we might lose. How much are we going to lose on this property?
Hmm.
I don't know. How long is it going to sit on the market?
Hmm.
It had been on the market at this point probably 5 months,
Wow.
and we had like maybe six showings and no offers. And I'm just like, okay. And I still haven't done that many deals, and I don't have
Right.
a ton of capital in the
Right.
bank to like suffer through like a huge loss
Sure.
because we had at this point we had already bought some other rental properties and had to invest some of our cash into those rental properties, right?
Uh-huh.
And
And you
so
had like some more kids at this point, and maybe.
um I think we may have, so we had one for sure at this point,
Yeah.
and I think,
Gotcha.
yeah, I think we had our second at that point.
Yeah. So there's a little more
um
pressure from that angle too.
Definitely a lot of pressure, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was in a pretty dark
Mm.
place, like
Hmm.
very very dark, like depressed is a strong word, but like,
Yeah.
I'm generally not a depressed person. I don't
Hmm.
generally have depression. But I was like on the verge of like, do I need to stop what I'm doing and go back
Hmm.
to work or something?
Yeah.
Um, it was tough, and it definitely. Um, I'm thankful that I went through that experience because it helped me
Hmm.
grow in my faith, and I'll explain that in a minute. Um, so we finally got an offer on the house. We were going to lose, I think the offer, I think we lost like over 40 grand on it.
Wow.
But interestingly enough, before we got the offer, we were like, okay, let's sell our Airbnb
Mm.
because
Hmm.
we can make a profit off the Airbnb. And it was just hard for us to manage too. We were self-managing it. It was
Yeah.
tough. It was tough to do from being 3 hours away, right? So my wife and I talked, we are like, all right, let's just sell the Airbnb. That'll release some stress, and hopefully we'll get some cash to, kind of offset this loss.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, my faith, because I believe that God has a plan, everything in plan and in
Hmm.
place for me. It's really tough for us to trust in that a
Yeah.
lot of
In the
times,
moment.
especially as an entrepreneur. You're like, all right, where's my next deal? What's going on? What's happening?
Right. You like to
And there was a
control everything.
I do. I like to control. There was a lot of that questioning between me and God. Like, I'm trying to trust you here, but what is going on, with this property?
Yeah.
So before we were under contract on the house that we were losing money on, we put the Airbnb up on the market.
Hmm. Hmm.
We ended up getting an offer on the house that we lost money on and on the Airbnb. So we were under contract on both.
Hmm.
And they both, we sold and settled on them on the exact same day,
Wow.
which to me is like mind blowing. Like, God
Yeah.
really had this in plan, right? Like, that
Right.
was not
Right.
an accident.
Yeah.
And the proceeds from the one house, that the Airbnb that we sold, and
Yeah.
the loss from the other
Yeah.
house that we
The
flipped
flip.
were almost like a net even. Like, so we almost broke even.
Wow.
So we lost, like, 40 some thousand on the one, and we gained like 40 some thousand on the sale of the Airbnb. So that to me was another
It was a
testimony.
huge blessing. I mean, it
Yeah.
could have
So,
been so
like,
much worse.
I mean, obviously, if I didn't lose the 40 or 50,000, like, that would have been
Yeah.
nice,
That
right?
would have been great. Sure.
But it has helped me. It helps me even today. I think back to that time
Hmm.
often when something's not going the way that I want it to go,
Yeah.
is that, hey, there's a plan that is set in place, and I may not know or see what that plan is
Hmm.
until after it happens. And I think
Absolutely.
I try to use that in all facets of my life, not
Hmm.
just in business.
Love that.
um so
Yeah.
so that
So,
was hard, that was tough. I'm
yeah.
glad I went through it because it has helped me grow
Right.
to where I am today.
So now you're seeking out more adversity?
Yeah, that's right. I just
No.
look for bad deals to buy because I wanted to
I,
grow
I,
me.
I want to be so much more thankful.
Yeah,
But so a couple of quick questions because we're about out of time, and I do have some rapid fire questions for you too.
sure.
But did you consider? I'm sure you did, but consider renting out the second property, the flip?
I did. I mean, I looked at all different options. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, if I rent it out, how much? Because I was going to lose money each month if I rented it out. But
Uh-huh.
I'm like, is
Gotcha.
it worth? I like to look at all different angles. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
is it worth losing, $500 a month or whatever it was going to
Right. Like
be?
spread out that loss
Spread
over
out the
time.
loss, right? Or
Yeah.
is it better to lose 40 grand at once?
Right.
And
Right.
I was on the verge of saying I'd rather just lose 500 a month because I can stomach that. If I had
Hmm.
millions and millions of dollars in the bank, a 40 grand
Yeah.
loss is no big deal, right? But
Right.
I was still a newer, and I'm still new today, right?
Yeah.
Newer, right? As a newer entrepreneur, it's harder to stomach those things,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, the thought
Right.
crossed my mind. It just didn't make sense. And when the offer came in, it was like, okay, let's just cut our
Yeah.
losses and move on.
Well, the other thing I want to point out too is for the real estate investor out there who's looking for deals, you don't know what the seller has going on. So in this case, Mark had, a lot of things going on that had nothing to do with that short-term rental. Yes, the short-term rental, the craftsmanship was uh, less than desirable from your contractor, and you know, yes, you made money on the deal. Like, yes, you were self-managing, but like the property itself, it sounds like was in a good location and is still a good investment, for somebody. What I'm saying is they don't know about your other deal that is really taking your focus away from the short-term rental. And so people say, like, why would the seller, there must be something wrong with this, with the seller selling this. It's like, well, they may need to sell for some other reason. And I know
Absolutely.
you buy deals at a discount all the time, so you know this as well as anyone, but it doesn't mean that there's just something inherently wrong with this property, is my point.
Right.
Is you're whoever bought that deal from you really solved a big problem for you.
Absolutely.
And and it wasn't just because of that property by itself. So there's a lot of factors that go in. There's a human element, and there's a Mark personal story and the family elements and all this that plays into this that particular deal that you sold. So, um, when people say, "Well, why is this guy selling this? There must be something wrong with it." Well, he might just need to sell for reasons completely unrelated to the property itself. Um, and I
Yeah,
shouldn't just say
there's
he.
always there's always a form of motivation. You just got to figure
Right,
out what it is. My
right,
motivation
right,
was I need to sell this because I need to offset this other loss,
right.
But
Exactly.
somebody else who's selling is might have a completely different motivation.
Yeah. So if you look at the Deep Creek experience, those two deals as a whole, what were one or two of your biggest lessons learned?
Um, Focusing on like having a laser focus on what you're trying to achieve, because I'll tell you, as soon as I sold those properties, I felt like my business was so much more healthy or like
Okay.
successful. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it just was a very big distraction because number one, it was so far away. It was hard to
Hmm.
get like as an entrepreneur, I'm like, let's get stuff done. Like if I have to go
Yeah.
do it myself, I'll go do it. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to drive 3 hours to go change a light bulb or something, right? Whereas if I have
Sure.
a property in Baltimore, I'll just drive, however far
Hmm.
and change something really quick if I absolutely need to.
Yeah.
So I think I got distracted
Hmm.
and was trying to do maybe too many things at once, and
Yep.
I wasn't fully submersed into my own market before I started
Yeah.
to go try to tap into another market.
Right.
And I think that was a mistake that I made.
Yeah.
And
I think it's a
it yeah,
common
it was kind
entrepreneurial
of
mistake.
bittersweet selling the Airbnb because it was
Hmm.
like, a place that I like envision our family going to for years to come, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna pay this down. It's we're gonna have this for however many years. But in hindsight, it was the best thing that we ever
Yeah.
did in terms of getting rid of it, just because it kind of relieved a lot of stress. It helped us offset that loss, and we
Yeah.
learned a lot of lessons kind of moving forward.
Well, you still have time to get another Deep Creek property. You're
Yeah,
only what,
that's true.
36, you said tomorrow?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, all right, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Let's go.
All right. What is one thing that people misunderstand about you? This one's a
Um,
tough one.
Misunderstand about me. I don't know. I I think sometimes I've always looked young. I don't know if this is a good answer, but I'm just gonna go with it. I've always looked really young, right? And so I think
Hmm.
people look at me. I've had so many comments over the years of like, "Oh wow, like you look so young to be, doing this or doing that." Like I don't know how old people think I am, but part of it's like I can't grow facial hair, right? So like this is like a week worth of facial hair for me. Um, so I
You did
think
that for the podcast?
I did, yeah. Specifically, I wanted to look a little older. Um, so I think people maybe um, uh, have some sort of preconceived
Hmm.
mindset of who I am, because it's like, oh, this 10-year-old
Like
is
how much knowledge you
right.
should have at this point or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
Um, if you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would that be?
Don't smoke so much weed. No, I think just taking action. Like I honestly think that taking action is one of the biggest things that people miss
Hmm.
about doing anything. And for instance, like, people will say, "Oh, I'm praying that God will provide X, Y, and
Hmm.
Z for me." And it's
Hmm.
like, okay, yeah, that's great, but he's not going to do that for you if you don't take the action, right? Like I heard this quote, it was from uh Andy Andrews has a book. What's it called? The Seven Decisions.
Okay. No,
Do you know Andy
haven't read
Andrews?
that one. No.
He also wrote The Traveler's Gift, which is really a
Oh,
really
I've seen,
interesting book.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a fun book to listen to. It's kind of like a story, right? But anyway, in the
Hmm.
Seven Decisions, he makes the comment, and I think he's a Christian as well. God promises to provide for the bird, right? That's a scripture. In scripture, it says
Yeah.
he provides for the sparrow or whatever. But
Yeah.
he doesn't promise to put the worm in the nest. So I took
Nice.
that. I'm like, that is like so good, right? Like you have to
Right.
take the action for him. Like you
Yeah.
can pray all you want, but if you're not taking action, nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. My wife and I are working through the Chosen series, and Jesus and the disciples definitely took a lot of action, that's for sure. What is one or two books that you could recommend besides the ones you've already mentioned?
um, it's funny. I thought about that as I was coming on, because I was like, if he asked me, I'm gonna recommend The Traveler's Gift or The Seven Decisions.
Nice.
But
Okay.
I would say either one of those books, or um, I mean, I really I go back to Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's probably not the
Yeah.
greatest book I've ever read, but it was a good book, and it's what kind of started my whole mindset shift, right?
Yeah.
And mindset is everything to me.
hmm
I constantly have to work on my mindset every day about, what am I thinking? What am I trying to achieve? Things like that. So um, I always go back to
Absolutely.
that book as one of my go-tos,
Um,
or any Bigger Pockets book. They're all good.
yeah. And my book, right?
Or I was going to say, there's a book right in the background right there that's phenomenal.
From Adversity to Abundance. That's what you meant to say.
Yeah, sorry,
Um,
I failed that question. My bad.
wrong. Um, what is one thing that you've seen in real estate investing that's controversial or potentially unethical, just broadly speaking?
Yeah, I think there are some investors. I think house flippers get a bad rap. It's like,
hmm
oh, this house was flipped, it must be trash. And
Right.
I mean, that is the case for some. Like,
Sure.
there are some flippers who I've heard, it's like, okay, there's rotted wood in the walls. Cover it up with
Mm,
drywall.
leave it. Yeah.
Yeah, leave it, and just hope nobody notices. So, but to me, like, I don't care if it costs me more money. I would rather fix those things because of who I am, right? I don't want to sell somebody, even if they're never going to know or never going to see it. I don't want to
Yeah.
sell somebody a house like that, right? So, um, I think there's an easy, it's easy for real estate investors and entrepreneurs to get caught up in, like, I gotta have more of this, I gotta have more of that, I gotta have more of this,
hmm
and maybe to, like, you know, screw somebody else over just to, like, help yourself.
Sure.
Now that's not to say, like, most of the people in our real estate field, like, it is kind of like it's a large group, but it's kind of a small community. Like,
hmm
most of the people are helpful. So I don't want to say that, give all these people a bad rap. I'm just saying,
Right.
if there was something negative, it would kind of be those types of
Yeah.
things.
I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, there's a low barrier to entry to become a quote unquote real estate investor, and that can take on many, many shapes and sizes. But
Hmm.
therefore, and same thing in the mortgage note space where I'm more focused, there's some shady people. And
Right.
yes, it's probably less than 5% of the group, but um, there are ripple effects. But so looking forward in the real estate investing space, whether we're talking Maryland or just broadly, what are some emerging challenges that you see for real estate entrepreneurs moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think the change in the market potentially, it's
hmm
it's still pretty good today. I mean, I've seen it. It depends on the area. So, like, when
hmm
COVID first hit, and I find myself lucky because I feel like I got in at a good time, right? Because
hmm
right when I got in, it was like houses were selling over asking, and everybody was waiving inspections, and that type of stuff is still happening today,
hmm
um, but in specific areas,
hmm
right? So, like, I had a house in the city recently that sat on the market for like 4 months. Nice house, like, decent renovation. Just the price point was higher, and it was surrounded by like the neighborhood was nice, right? But you go one block over, and it's like not a nice neighborhood.
hmm
So I think that's a challenge moving forward. Even for me, like, trying to figure out, like, what is the market doing. It's just a little bit harder,
hmm
but I do also think that that brings opportunities, because I think that people are going to be nervous. People are always nervous and scared about the market, right? Especially, like, with, like, the election coming up and stuff like that. I don't want to get into
hmm
politics, but that
hmm
type of stuff affects the market sometimes, right? And so for
Sure.
me, like, I'm definitely making sure that when I'm analyzing deals, I am giving myself a good margin. I'm still making offers, still trying to buy properties. Just, you got to buy right
hmm
to make it work.
Be a little more careful.
Yeah.
Um, makes total sense. So who should reach out to you? Who are you trying to connect with? I know you deal with hard money lenders, private lenders. You need a lending source in general, and you need deal flow. Those are kind of, and you obviously you need subcontractors and things to do the deals. But who who are you trying to serve, and who should connect with you?
Yeah, and I didn't talk about this that much, but I do want, like, I want to bring, it's part of the reason like why I was excited to come on the podcast. I want to
Hmm.
bring value to anybody, right?
Hmm.
Bringing value. There have been so many investors that have brought me value, and
Hmm.
I want to return that favor to whoever, right? So
Hmm.
anybody who's a new entrepreneur or trying to get into the real estate field, I'm happy to answer any questions or help them
Hmm.
out in any way I can. And I'm always trying to make connections with other private lenders,
Hmm.
which private lenders are like just, regular individuals, like, your
Hmm.
uncle or friend or whoever,
Yep.
to invest with me. I always want to make connections with other wholesalers, and it's not just about like what can I get from you. It's like, hey, how can we work together? Like, if you're a
Hmm.
wholesaler, you bring me deals, you bring me value by bringing me deals, I bring you value by buying your deals, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of like a circle of value type thing.
Sure. No, I love
So
it. I mean,
anybody
that's
who wants to reach out to me, I
yeah.
mean, listen, I've been doing this for 4 years, so I still have a lot of room to grow, right? And sometimes when I'm in a room with other higher level entrepreneurs, I'm like, man, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
But then when somebody who doesn't know anything talks to me, I feel like I have so much information to share with
Yeah.
them.
You
So it's kind
forget
of
how
like,
much you've learned.
yeah,
And
right. So
and you've been doing, I mean, yes, actively 4 years, but like I said, you've been in construction most of your life. You've worked for investors and entrepreneurs most of your life before becoming one yourself. And so uh, you've been involved in real estate and construction for longer than 4 years. But
yeah,
absolutely, I hear what you're saying. There's always a ton more to learn, and somebody that's way ahead of you. But we forget, I do mentorship in mortgage note investing, and sometimes I forget that, some of the questions I'll get are, how do I start an LLC? I'm just like, oh, I forgot that's a thing that you have, like, that's important, right? And then how
yeah,
do I get a bank account? Oh, I need to get an EIN from the IRS before I can get a bank account. That's right. These little things that you might take for granted, depending on how far along you are. And also your path is very different from somebody else's, like you said before. So you're going to have, even if someone's 10 years in and you're only 4 years in, you're going to know things that that person doesn't know. So we
right,
can all help each other. And I can tell from the Facebook groups that I've seen you in that you're always trying to add value and make it a mutually beneficial scenario so you can grow with others. And that's what we need more of. I mean, capitalism and entrepreneurship get a bad rap because of a few bad apples, but
right,
ultimately we're trying to add value, like you said, and flippers, generally speaking, add value to a neighborhood and add value to everyone they come in contact with. So awesome. Well, Mark, where can our listeners reach out to you? Where can they find you online?
yeah. We don't have a massive um, social media presence. I mean, I'm I'm on
Well,
it
now this
because,
episode's out, so that's going to change.
right, yeah, it's gonna, go. We're gonna go from one follower to, two. Yeah, so you can reach out to me on Facebook. I have, my own Facebook, but we also have
And
an
spell your last
Instagram.
name.
Passerelli. So you can reach out to me on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Phoenix Estates is the company name,
Why'd you
and
pick that name?
it's a faith-based thing for me. So actually I have a tattoo of a phoenix, and I was trying to think through, like, so the this is kind of a long story, so I'll
Hmm.
try to be as short as I can. The phoenix to me is like a revitalization of my faith, right? So like the phoenix, like it dies and it turns into ashes, and from the ashes comes a new phoenix, a new bird, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah,
renewed and restored. And that's
it's
kind of how
awesome.
I feel like my faith, like, yeah, I had this faith, but then I like I kind of had to like die to myself, and like from the
Mm,
ashes, like God brought me out of those
mm,
things. And so that means a lot to me.
sure.
And I was trying to, like, as I was coming up with the company name, I was like, how can I incorporate my faith? Because
Hmm.
ultimately, like, that's one of my main goals is to share my faith with people,
Hmm.
right? Um, and so
Love it.
it kind of works into like revitalizing houses, right? Like I'm taking these houses that are kind of like
Yeah.
trashy, most of them, and turning them into, you know, trying to better the community by
Right.
fixing up
Love
houses.
that.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
I had a guy who worked for me for a long time, Stephen Berkey, and he had his company name was Phoenix Notes, and I never I never asked him why it was called that. So I'll have to
Yeah.
follow up and ask him. But I'm
Yeah.
glad I asked you.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to say I was thinking about is, in terms of mindset, is I think exercise is
Mm,
severely underrated.
hmm.
Like with
Absolutely.
mindset, and I'll tell you why. So I used to work for, like we talked about before, a
Yeah.
higher end remodeling company, right? A lot of these
Right.
people were pretty successful.
Yeah.
Um, and I noticed that because you're in their house a lot, you
Yeah. You get
see
to know.
who they are, right?
Right.
Most of them had some sort of exercise routine, like they would go to the
Sure.
gym or whatever. And it kind of like, I was like, why is that? Okay, the act of exercise doesn't make you successful,
No,
but like primes your mind
for
and
sure.
gives you a routine of doing something. And I have been, I've been, I'm an athlete. I've been on and off like exercising, right? But I over the last like 3 or 4 or 5 months, I've been like really exercising a lot more. And
Hmm.
if especially in the morning, it
Hmm.
primes my mind for the day, right?
Love
So I
that.
would just say, if you're newer to entrepreneurship and you're not exercising, or even if you are an entrepreneur and you're not, I would
Yeah.
highly recommend. And I don't honestly do it even for that long. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
like 30 minutes. Sometimes it's 20
Yeah.
minutes, right? But it's like some sort of exercise, lifting
Physical
weights
activity.
and
Yeah.
running, that just gets me going. So I just wanted to
There's
throw that in there.
and I probably need to weave in a more intentional set of questions about tips for mental fitness, but I couldn't agree more. I won't get into it too much, but I've been pretty heavily focused on mental health in the last couple of years, not just for me, but for various reasons. But it's so, I mean, exercise consistently is top three in, just contributing factors to healthy, mental conditioning and relationships, exercise, diet. I think are the
Hmm.
three that kind of are always there. But I couldn't agree more. It's like even if you don't want to do it, it doesn't mean you should. You know, I mean, sleep is critical too. But yeah, I've been doing a cold plunge in the morning actually
Oh,
now, and
I'm all about the cold plunge
it's
every
so
morning.
good every
Every
morning,
morning.
there's some mornings it's easier than other mornings, and some mornings it's just a matter of it's much more of a mental thing than anything else. I'm like, no, I'm in charge. I am
Yeah.
in charge, and I'm getting in this cold plunge right now.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty, and it's only been a few weeks since I got it, but oh man, it's been great. And
I've been doing it consistently for about a year, and
that's awesome.
it's like, everybody laughs at me. And I've been taking more cold showers now than baths, just
Uh-huh.
because it's easier for me to, because with the bath I have to like fill up the tub, and it just takes a
Yeah.
longer period of time.
Yeah.
But the cold showers, it is so revitalizing. Like you get out,
Yeah.
it's awful
Absolutely.
getting in, right? But when you
Yeah.
get out, you feel so good. And I think
Right.
Tony Robbins, I think I heard something that Tony
Yeah.
Robbins said, where he's like, he's training his mind to do something right away in the morning that he doesn't want
Yeah.
to do.
Right.
And he's training his mind to just do it without thinking. Like you don't sit there and like contemplate, should I get in the cold shower or the
Right.
tub?
You
I
just
don't
do it.
know. I don't even think about it. I get in, I turn it on, and it's like, woo,
Yeah.
this is
He's been doing
awful.
it for years, and yeah.
Yeah. So I would
Um,
recommend that as well. It sounds goofy, but it works.
right. Absolutely. And just so you know, I am going to play pickleball here in a little over an hour, so I'm getting my exercise in.
I'm all
Um,
about some pickleball, man. That's an
but
old man sport, I thought.
it, exactly, exactly. Um, it's way more fun than I expected it would be. But Mark Passerelli, this has been awesome, my friend. This has been great.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us and sharing opening up about the loss in Deep Creek. And but really so much more than that, more about your faith and um, overcoming, I guess, your own personal negative thoughts and beliefs and things, and just reconnecting with your faith and how that's contributed to your success. I think there's so many other things I could point out, but those are some key highlights that I got from this episode, and I know our listeners got a lot as well. So thanks a lot for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to the listener out there, please check out our website, adversity2abundance.com. That's the number 2. And we love 5-star reviews, and we love it when you share episodes with your friends and family. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.